Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Athlete Enlightened, where we talk about health, wellness, and fitness. And today we're going to be talking specifically about the concept of injury prevention, or injury recovery, rather. And specifically, I'll be sharing essentially a story from my own experience, which is basically the time I was in a car crash and ended up getting my fibula and my wrist broken, and I'll explain basically how I rehabilitated myself without any physio, without anything but natural medicines, and just almost spiritual modalities that you learn from basically ancient cultures, which I knew kind of prior to this incident occurring, and it really helped me in recovering and rehabilitating myself without the assistance of any doctors or any, physiotherapists or chiropractors, anything like that. So essentially, maybe I'll just start by explaining a little bit about what happened. So essentially, I was in this car accident probably a couple of years ago, probably a little over 2 years ago now, and I was going straight through the light, and this woman came out of nowhere and made a left turn when she did not have the right of way, and basically at first when I first got into this accident, it was almost like the scene from a movie when everything's really high pitch and your ears are ringing and it's almost like white light around you, and you kind of come to it a bit. I wouldn't say I was knocked out, but I was definitely disorientated. One of the things I will say, a little useful tip here in terms of for all the gym bros watching, I was on creatine at the time, so that might have been the reason why I maybe didn't get knocked out or concussed or anything like that, because it is shown that creatine actually reduces the impact of TBI, which stands for traumatic brain injury. So that was one of the factors which I felt help buffer the impact from affecting me to maybe a more significant amount. So I didn't get knocked out, and I had so much adrenaline flowing through me that actually when I was able still to walk around, because my maybe we'll get the first image actually up to explain, but here you can see in the diagram we have the tibia and fibula, which are the lower bones of the leg, and the fibula was what was broken when I was in this accident in terms of what was broken in my leg. So I was still able to walk around because there was so much adrenaline flowing through me. I didn't know that that part of my leg was broken at that time. So still able to walk around a bit, and then eventually, when the ambulance came, I went in the ambulance, and then you start to feel it after a little while. The adrenaline starts to wear off, and then by the time you get to the hospital, you're really feeling it without the pain meds. But in any case, that was basically what happened right after the accident, and essentially, after I went home, I was basically I was bouncing around on one leg for a month, because your leg obviously takes a bit of time to heal. That's a big bone, right? And also my wrist was broken as well, because when you're driving, you're holding onto the steering wheel, and typically when you get in an accident, that is almost like your go-to mechanism for buffering the impact or keeping yourself from jerking forward, right? So in any case, that was one of the things that I was affected. Basically, this bone right here, I wouldn't even say it's probably on the medial side of the ulna was what's broken. But in any case, basically the bones were broken, and I was basically laid up for a month. I would say I wasn't able to really move or do any exercise or whatever. So I was just using my knowledge of what I learned about basically keeping your muscles in shape, basically ensuring that you get enough protein in your diet, making sure you're eating the correct foods and stuff. So when you're going through that recovery process, your body has all the fuel it still needs to perform that recovery properly, right? It's almost like the difference between if you're in a state where your body needs a certain type of energy or a certain amount of nutrients to fuel this recovery process, and you feed it garbage, then it's not going to perform that recovery process as fast or as efficiently as it would if you gave it the right things, right? So this was kind of the basis of what was transpiring here. So, for example, like things like even like certain nuts, like pistachios, are shown to increase like gamma brainwave activity, as we talked about on my previous podcast, Moonstruck, which you can check out in the description below. Basically, this gamma brainwaves that is produced or help it to be increased by this superfood actually helps the body in not only processing lots of information, lots of data, but also activating profound states of healing and higher energy levels within the cerebral cortex, also known as the brain. So in any case, that was something pretty vital, making sure you're getting your food and nutrition and whatnot. The other thing that's important is ensuring that you get enough protein to ensure that your body's muscle is not breaking down in that time where you're not moving around, right? Because, you know, the muscles are really is what's going to almost act like the cushion that helps those bones fuse back together or maintain their stability, right? So especially in a state where it's kind of susceptible to flux, right? A lot of people sometimes find that they have to go to physio or whatever because that bone does not initially fuse back perfectly after that accident, right? Or after a certain incident where you occur or sustain some type of injury, right? So the functionality doesn't move exactly the same, but that's typically because the factors or conditions needed to make that recovery process smooth or function well is not present, right? So that's a very important thing that I would say, making sure that you have the nutrition, making sure you get your protein, making sure you get all these things that are necessary for recovery after you break a bone, right? So in any case, maybe we'll go on to the next image there, and you can look a little bit closer, and you can see here in this other picture, you can see a clear image of the tibia and fibula. So obviously the fibula is the bone at the back of the leg. It's much more for support in terms of actually ensuring that the leg itself is moving in like overall stability, right? So it really helps with that factor of stability. It really helps that movement to be succinct throughout the leg. But as we were just going over an anatomy today, shout out to Sean, that we were talking about basically the tibia is the factor of the leg that ensures that all of that pressure or weight is being supported, right? So that's basically why you can still move around after the fibula is broken, right? Because the tibia is taking most of the weight off the body or off the leg. We'll go on to the next image actually, and we'll look at the wrist now. So also, I didn't want to include any images of like the x-rays or like aftermath of the incident, because like I know some people are like sensitive to gore and stuff like that, so I figured keep some of the images out of that and we'll just look at the skeleton. But here we can see like the carpals and the bones of the hand. Also we can see like the radius and ulna on the lower arm. So it was pretty much I think we have another image that we'll go to in a second, but typically it's almost the space in between the carpals and the radius and ulna that was damaged on the inside, the medial aspect. The medial aspect just means on the inside. So we'll go to the next image actually, and we'll look at maybe a closer view. So here we could see the radius and the ulna. So actually I misspoke earlier. So the radius is actually probably what was affected. So it's this little part in between your wrist here. So obviously if you're holding the steering wheel and like, you know, like some guys, like, you know, obviously when you learn how to drive, they say, oh, 10 and 2 position, whatever. But, you know, typically most people after a while, they like, you know, predominantly use one hand. Maybe they use the other hand to support when they're turning or whatever. But typically if you're going straight, you might hold the wheel with like your main hand or whatever. So that was really the part of like my body that took most of the impact in terms of cushioning that blow from the accident. In any case, we'll go on to the next image and we'll talk about a little bit about this rehabilitation and recovery process. So obviously, most of us think like medicine from the doctor is predominantly what is used in terms of rehabilitating the body. What is the doctor going to prescribe to make the body heal itself? Bro, the doctor prescribed me nothing to heal the body, so like I had to figure all of that out on my own, my guy. Um, but in essence, the thing I would allude to is that was almost a valuable lesson for me, because it really like presents the point that you can't rely on anybody, no matter in what position you are in life, to do anything for you properly, right? And this is one of the main reasons, like I always say, the primary thing you should do on this earth, and again, this is just my philosophy, you don't have to adopt this if it doesn't resonate with you, but in my opinion, the first thing you should learn as a human being on this planet is how your body functions, right? Because the thing is, it's almost like Abraham Lincoln said about the aspect of chopping down trees. You'd spend the first couple hours sharpening the axe, right? So it's about the concept of having whatever instrument you are using to be an instrument of your will, to ensure that you know how to use it and it's used efficiently and properly, right? It's almost like using a sword to like chop down trees. Like, you're gonna dull the blade of the sword, right? So it's not very efficient, right? In any case, I'm not going to go into what specific herbs I used in terms of, recovery for the body, because, this is a college podcast and I probably can't talk about all of these. But essentially, you're probably familiar with some of them since we do live in the area of Canada. Wink, wink. So in any case, there are a lot of studies behind these things showing that, it reduces inflammation, it helps in recovery, especially of stress, mental stress, especially in times of injury. So you see a lot of like UFC fighters or boxers use a lot of like these, like, we'll call them supplements or, psychoactive drugs to, assist them in their recovery process. In any case, that was, I felt, a really pivotal part of this recovery process coming to fruition as well, along with things like meditation, listening to binaural beats. Binaural beats, if you don't know what those are, they're basically certain frequencies that you listen to, and it helps your body tune into certain brainwave states and activate certain processes within the body, such as healing, stress relief, whatever. And I felt those were especially effective, especially like significantly in the case where you have some kind of like bone broken, because let me tell you from experience, that is not a pleasant feeling by any stretch of the imagination. So that was something significant that I felt like helped relieved a lot of pain and also helped the recovery process speed along. So binaural beats, so medicinal herbs, I'm not going to list them, but, Canada, wink, wink, you can probably inference. Medicinal herbs, binaural beats. Another thing we're going to get into is actually the factor of mobility and starting to get back into your routine. I mentioned diet already, so that's another thing. Diet in terms of making sure you get enough protein, making sure you are, if you are using a supplement like creatine, that it is also benefiting that recovery process or assisting you. In essence, those are the main ones in terms of like consumable things that you put in your body. Mindfulness, another thing that helps. Things like meditation, utilizing certain postures for, this practice or whatever is particularly important in terms of this rehabilitation process. Being able to move around, so regaining your mobility even through subtle things like just going outside and attempting to walk around is important, because it's telling your body to not atrophy. It's telling it that you want to regain that range of motion and start to move your body as it would function normally. So we'll go on actually to the next image and we'll talk about this factor. So a lot of people don't think about this when it comes to injury recovery, but this might be, I always like a little bit toot my own horn here, but like, this might be one of the most significant videos you will have ever watched around injury recovery, because I'm about to outline everything from my own personal experience that actually has helped me recover. And it's all based on science. It's all based on also ancient wisdom that they knew since a long time ago. One of the other things you can do, actually, maybe I'll list this as more of a spiritual tip. If you are just like wanting to do something simple, you can basically sun gaze, which is just the aspect of, looking at the sun near either dawn or dusk, and when it's at a low phase. And basically the Egyptians used to believe that that energy helped the glands of the body, like the pineal and pituitary gland, function better in order to basically assist the overall functioning of the human body. Moving on back to, kind of the more natural and scientifically supported things, we'll also look at the magnetic field of the Earth, which actually is a big factor, which a lot of people don't think about. But every time you walk around in nature, and this is one thing that is significantly overlooked even in modern day, right? Because, nowadays young people are not wanting to go outside. They're not wanting to get sunlight, which helps. I mentioned this numerous times, that it helps express hundreds and even thousands of genes in the body, which are necessary, and that through vitamin D. And if you don't know, vitamin D is actually, it's not technically a vitamin, it's a steroid hormone which helps your body express numerous genes. So that's actually something very useful, and it assists with cellular process, regeneration, etc., etc. I'm not going to go into the whole list because we'd be here all day. So getting that sunlight is very important at a very basic level for the optimization of your body's ability to utilize vitamins, such as like calcium, for example. Vitamin D is needed to help the absorption of calcium and all these things. So that's one important thing. But just being outside in nature, a lot of people find, like, if you're stressed and you go outside and take a deep breath, or you walk around a bit, or go for a walk, you come back, you feel better. And why is that? Is because your body is naturally tuning into the vibration of nature. You're tuning into the vibration of something that is already self-regulating. So your energy, and that energy in phase, is basically giving, it's almost like an equalizer. It balances you out, right? So that's basically what's going on by being in nature. But also there's a scientific aspect to this as well, which is that the Earth has a magnetic field around it. And if you don't know, your body also has this magnetic field around it. So basically, you're like a little magnet walking around on this big magnet, and anytime you're in contact with the physical ground of the Earth, particularly being out in nature, when you're either touching, any form of earth, whether that be rock, grass, whatever, even wood, if it's on the ground, all of these things are natural parts of the Earth which assist you with absorbing those electrical charges that are on the ground. And this is not spiritual woo-woo recovery science. We'll go to the next image and I'll explain it, actually. So basically in this next image, so here we can see the clouds that typically form when there's a thunderstorm or a lightning storm. I think there might be a lightning storm coming, but in any case, when a lightning storm is forming, for example, you have basically this formation, this densification of not only water vapor, the cloud formation, but you also have these ions built up in the clouds of positive charges, right? And you also have the charges on the ground, which are obviously both negative and positive. I didn't include in this diagram, but there's a whole bunch of different basically charges floating around, both negative and positive, on the ground and in the clouds. But typically this is the charge association, that on the surface of the ground there's negative charges, and in the cloud there is positive charges, right? And sometimes this is actually vice versa, right? Because there's different types of lightning. There's negative lightning, which is a common one we see most of the time, and then there's positive lightning, which is actually a lot stronger. So in any case, actually, this diagram might actually end up being backwards. The charge formation might end up actually being negative in the cloud and positive on the ground. But I digress, because that actually doesn't matter. The thing that's important to understand here is that the free ions that are on the Earth, by you walking around on that surface of the Earth, just going outside and walking around in the grass or in the yard or whatever, you are picking up those charges, and it is balancing out the electromagnetic energy of your field. And this is why so many spiritualists trumpet, like, oh, going and walking around barefoot on the ground, blah, blah, blah. You don't need to walk barefoot on the ground if you do not want to. It helps the process to be more effective, but you don't need to, because when I had my leg broken, I was not walking around barefoot on the ground, basically you're in a state where you can, getting your shoes on is enough of a difficult task. But in essence, I would go outside, I would put my shoes on, I would go outside, I would walk around in the grass, and I'd come back in after maybe anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour, or maybe even multiple hours you'd be outside for. And you just do that, and it balances out your field, and it make you feel better. Not only are you telling your body, hey, I want that range of motion back, I want that mobility back, and we need to start moving around. We can't just be stagnant or sit still and wait for the body to heal everything itself, but you're also allowing it to exchange energy with the environment around you, to exchange the charges of your body with the charges of the Earth. And through this process, actually the field around you, the bubble of what they would call aura, starts to repair itself, right? Like I said in previous videos on my other podcast, Moonstruck, everything in your everything related to you is representative through your aura. So if you get an injury, that is shown in your aura as well, right? But the thing is that can also be repaired through your aura, right? So when you pick up charges, when you do these recovery practices that I'm telling you about now, you can actually assist your energetic field around your body, the energy that is meant to flow unimpeded. Obviously that is disrupted when you get an injury, but it's helping it to return to that natural state of being able to flow unimpeded. So this is the basis actually of if you're somebody like myself who is very much like a naturalist, and you don't like to take whatever drugs a doctor might prescribe to you. By the way, they didn't prescribe me any, except some painkillers that wore out in a day or two. But in essence, if you're somebody who's very along the lines of natural recovery, wanting to rehabilitate yourself without going to physio, without going to see a doctor who's going to prescribe you some garbage that you don't know where it was made or how it's going to affect your body, then these are very important modalities to utilize in terms of the recovery process. And I'm not saying that you have to use every single one, but if you find some of these resonate and that they work for you, take them and use them. I'm here to help you guys. That's literally the whole reason why I do this show, right? It's just to share my own experience. And, if it resonates with you and you find this information at a time that you need it, then, divine is always on time, right? So in any case, we'll go to the next image, but this is the basis of this, that the magnetic field around the Earth is basically allowing, in its traditional sense, it would just be for the purpose of deflecting the charged particles of the sun away from the Earth, so that, when the sun has solar wind or a solar flare, we don't get burnt to a crisp. But the basis is that because the Earth is spinning and has this inherent magnetic field, it's able to deflect these charged particles that come from the solar wind of the sun. And by that deflection process going on, it actually charges the ionosphere and the upper atmosphere with these charged particles. But in essence, that's why basically you get all these charged particles in the atmosphere, and then you get similarly charged particles on the ground. And basically, by you being a piece of the earth, because you are basically a piece of the earth, you can walk around on the ground and exchange that energy with the earth, and the earth will help you recover, right? That's why they call it Mother Nature. What is a mother supposed to do? They're supposed to take care of you, nurture you, basically support the foundation, right? It's the aspect of support. So that's why they call it Mother Nature, because it's the all healing aspect, right? So this is why you have this kind of association with the earth, of this almost supportive energy, right? It's helping the roots of your body reestablish themselves and regrow. And that's why you see so many things connected to Mother Nature, such as herbs, teas. I would say tea is another one that you could add to the list of recovery. Tea is very important, filled with antioxidants, a whole bunch of things that, if you ever watched Avatar: The Last Airbender as a kid, Uncle Iroh, why you think he's always drinking tea? Not only because it's blissing him out, but also because it helps calm you down, it helps the system regulate, it helps the body balance out its energy, it makes you just overall feel better. And it doesn't wire you up like caffeine or any sort of coffee does, right? It's meant to be a regulator, a fluid, basically a fluid that regulates the body or helps the body flush out what it doesn't need, helps it recover, helps it repair itself. So tea is another great thing to add to the list of recovery things. But in essence, that's the majority of the story factors. We're coming up to almost half an hour here, so we'll probably end up going to around like 40 minutes or so, and I'll just wrap up near the end. But essentially, so far, we've covered quite a bit. We covered basically supplement like creatine, which for me, I was already taken before this incident occurred. So that helped buffer the impact. It helps actually increase the ATP in your system to produce more energy, which assists in things like recovery and with injuries and with things like preventing concussions or reducing TBI. So also helps actually promote the water around the blood-brain barrier, and that is actually what is assisting with you not getting TBI through utilizing creatine. So we talked about creatine. We talked about, what else did we talk about? We talked about protein. We talked about binaural beats. We talked about, what else did we talk about? We talked about like natural herbs. So I would include teas actually in natural herbs. So, any herbal medicine, again, we live in Canada, so, the rules for some of those might be different where you are. But in essence, those can assist you. Fish oil, actually, I would maybe put into this category as well. Fish oil is great for recovery in terms of reducing inflammation and stuff. So there's that. We talked about the factor of mobility, and basically getting your body familiar with movement again, and then getting into exercise when you can. I'm not saying right away. I'm saying like when your body is recovered enough that it can participate in exercise. And maybe because, your certain parts of your body are broken, you could exercise other parts, right? If your leg is broken, then do the upper body or whatever you can, right? Obviously, don't push yourself. If you're not ready for it, don't do it. Listen to your body. That would be like, first suggestion. But, it doesn't mean that you cannot do anything. There's always something that you can do, right? So we talked about mobility, and then basically, picking up the electric charges of the earth through the magnetic field, and that supporting your energetic field around your body, also known in, I guess anime as aura. So there's all these factors too, right? So what else did we talk about? We talked about being in nature, being in Mother Nature, and that acting as basically the supportive foundation that helps your body heal and provide that free-flowing energy of the electric charges and of basically balancing out your state overall by just harmonizing with the vibration that already exists in nature, fresh air and sunlight. So all of those things come from that. So you got basically seven tips there of how to basically recover naturally after you end up like breaking a bone or something like that. And again, this is all from my own personal experience. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a doctor. I'm basically a personal trainer, but I'm going to tell you how it is from my experience. I'm not going to say I'm a doctor and I'm going to prescribe you this and that, right? I'm just going to tell you, hey, this is what's worked for me. If it doesn't work, if it doesn't resonate with you, don't use it. Simple as that. So there's seven straight tips right there, right? One of the other things that I did, which was kind of more of a mental or emotional factor, was even though like this accident was completely this other person's fault, one of the things I did or made intention to do was not look at it like, hey, this is this person's fault. Because the thing is, like, things happen in life, and there's some people who spend their entire lives blaming other people for stuff that has transpired. Oh, this happened because of this person, or this was this person's fault, or this person made me feel that way, blah 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 blah, right? So there's always somebody that you can blame or whatever. But when it comes to these things, realizing that these things have happened and there's no going back in time and changing that or anything like that, you realize that what is the best thing for me right now? It's to look after myself, to basically give that energy to myself that I can benefit and transform that into something useful. What is something more productive than giving out disdain for another person? Is giving love to yourself, because you're the one who needs it at this point in time, right? So realizing that, okay, this has transpired. It might have been this person's fault on a subjective level, but objectively, these things happen, and you just have to move on with life. You can't hold on to the past and say, oh, I'm going to try and blame this person, whatever, even if it is their fault, right? Like, the thing is, the police, found her guilty and, actually wanted to charge her with reckless driving. But I'm not going to get into that, but in essence, though, she was found basically the one who was guilty in this accident, and I just chose to let it go and not sue her or not do anything against her, because I was thinking from the perspective of, how is this for the overall good of everybody? What's the best thing, most productive thing I can do right now? It's to heal myself and to move on with my life, right? Like, you're not going to turn back time. You're not going to, holding on to things like greed or, malicious intent or, anything that is very manipulative in nature, or just, of malice intent. None of those things are productive in terms of benefiting yourself after like this kind of situation has transpired, right? So that's the lens that you have to look at a lot of these things through, right? Is what I'm doing for the greatest good? And not just of yourself, but because everything you do has an impact on the people around you, whether you realize it or not. It's almost like people say about, like love, for example. You can't pour from an empty cup, right? So typically people who don't know how to love themselves or give themselves that support that they need try to blame other people constantly. Oh, this and this, blah blah blah. But it's just because they don't have any kind of other emotion that they can productively give to themselves, so they have to try and attack other people to derive some kind of self-pleasure or a good feeling about themselves, right? So this is the basis behind these concepts, that things in life will happen to you, but if you can be a prepared individual and realize that none of this is your fault, as I've said before on multiple podcasts or podcast episodes, none of this may be your fault, but it is your responsibility. So and that's a very, I feel like, a very powerful and pivotal line to this concept. And you always hear this in TV shows, especially like, anime, or any kind of like fictional character shows. You always hear the superhero, or the protagonist talking about great power comes with great responsibility. So it's the same kind of thing, right? It's about utilizing your tools wisely, right? Allowing that to be of benefit to yourself, and that transpire into the outside world. Through this incident happening, I was able to come back to college. I was able to start a podcast. I was able to share this experience with other people in hopes that it can benefit them, right? So all of these things naturally come out of an experience that somebody could have perceived as, oh yeah, this terrible thing happened, boo-hoo me, right? And I turn that into something that can be of benefit, not just to myself, but benefit through myself to other people as well, right? So now somebody else watching this who might have sustained an injury might say, hey, this person recovered themselves naturally. There's no reason why I cannot, right? So that's all I'm trying to teach, or explain here rather, on this podcast, that basically, like I said, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility, and you're the only one who can take charge of your own life. If you want something to change, you have to be that change. You have to embody that change, right? If you want to heal yourself, you have to be that embodiment of the person who can be healed, or is healed rather. So you have to be the embodiment of that person who is healed. So, and like I said, that translates into every aspect of the things you do. And, this is why I found that this was maybe such a crucial episode to make, injury recovery, because not only do a lot of people sustain injuries in the world, whether that be of, illness, physical injury, some kind of like, maybe even like mental condition, or something that's occurring on a psychological level. Like, all of these things can relate to that as well, right? Because as we've talked about on Moonstruck, my previous podcast, which once again I will link in the description below, there's 3 aspects to your being, spirit, mind, body, right? So spirit, mind, body, right? So there's 3 aspects to that, and they all work together, right? So the point is that, when you have that spirit, mind, body, and realize that it is like this trinity of stuff that works together, and all of these affect one another, then you start to not only look at the world differently, but yourself differently as well. Like, I'm not just whatever transpires in the environment. I am the person who is the polarity to that, right? Because I'm the person experiencing it. So like I said, if you want to change something, you must also change yourself, right? So it's about realizing, who do I want to be? And with that being said, again, like I said earlier, this is why I felt like this was such an important episode to make, because a lot of people do sustain things like this, and my main goal is just to teach people that, hey, or explain to people that, hey, there is a way you can rehabilitate yourself. There is a way you can recover. There is a way to do it naturally. There is a way to basically recover all the range of motion that you had before. There is a way to basically completely heal yourself. There is a way to, one of the things I actually did not mention yet, and if you're still watching, thank you for staying with me this long, but also here's a little key point actually that I forgot to mention. When I was in the accident, actually I went to the doctor after the accident, and they tested the circulation in my right foot, which is the foot, or the leg that had the injury. And it turns out that I had nerve damage in that foot, because not only was my foot like a bit cold, when I would touch it compared to my other foot, but I couldn't flex the muscles in it, meaning that there was nerve damage happening. And all that nerve damage now is gone. There's no nerve damage anymore. But at the time that the incident occurred, I couldn't move my foot too much after. And the reason why is because the nerve cells in the foot had most likely been killed off. And the thing is that, a lot of, science textbooks and blah, blah, blah will say, like, or biology textbooks, whatever, they will say, like, oh, yeah, nerve cells are very hard to regrow, this and that. I wasn't listening to any of that garbage. I was just saying that, hey, we're I'm part of the cosmos, and the cosmos can do anything. So there's no reason why I cannot heal myself, right? Don't forget that this is a tip if you stuck around this long, that your body has stem cells in it known as adult stem cells. They're similar to embryonic stem cells, but in essence they can form any cell that the body needs in order to repair itself, and it comes from your bone marrow. So essentially what will happen is, if you can convey to the body that it needs stem cells to repair something, it will dig those up from the bone marrow and use it to create any cell the body needs in order to repair the body. So there's your tip if you stuck around this long and you're continuing to watch. So I thank you very, very much for watching, because this was something actually pretty life-changing almost in my experience. And like I said, there's a whole bunch of people around who will, try to, basically just allow this to be some kind of complete negative experience. But I'm here to show you and tell you from my experience that it's what you make of it, right? And it's deciding, who do I want to be and where do I want my path to go, right? So if you're always like looking down or looking for the lowest thing, then you can't go up. But if you look for the highest thing, then you can go up. So it's about focusing on where you want to go and realizing that you have the ability to do anything you set your mind to. You just need to commit to that concept, right? So, and just in terms of basically what I said about stem cells, all of those processes which I mentioned, being out in nature, picking up the electric charges on the ground, having magnetic fields around you. I'm not going to get into the benefits of magnetic fields, but essentially it's related to what I was saying about electric charges, is that it supports your aura, helps it heal, and allows these cells to function and repair things that sometimes medical professionals deem as, oh, that's impossible, you can't regenerate that. And look at all the miracles that have happened in the medical field with even something as simple as placebo, believing that it is possible, believing that if I take this pill it will cure me, right? The pill was water. There was nothing in it, but it healed you anyway. Why is that? It's the belief that healed you. The chemicals were created in the system once you believe that it works. So placebo is really a blanket term that they used, almost like throwing water on top of fire to get people to disbelieve in the concept that anything you put your mind to actually becomes manifest. So if you believe that you're healed, you are healed. So, but again, it's about those mental blocks, right? And overcoming those or transforming those so they're no longer there, right? And then you can truly fly free. And I think with that, we're coming to the end, but I just wanted to touch on that concept of placebo, that it is very much like they threw a bucket of water on top of the fire, and the fire was almost like a divine flame that teaches human beings that anything that you focus on can manifest. So, but when they throw a term like placebo on top of it, it's like, oh, that's just a scientific principle to, disprove this phenomenon, right? And make people disbelieve in it. And again, I've always trumpeted science on my previous show, Moonstruck, but the thing that I always focus on or try to remind the audience of is that it's not about believing that science is true. It's about, if that is true, how would I act? And that's why I've always focused on the most productive parts of science, which relates to learning about expansive concepts that maybe we didn't even think were possible. But don't base your life on anything that you read in maybe a science textbook and believe it as absolute 100% truth. Because not only is science always learning things, like the human race as a whole is always learning things, and the cosmos is constantly in flux, and the cosmos is expanding. So everything in the field is constantly changing. So don't tie yourself down to, oh yeah, back in 1995 I read in a textbook that these cells, once they're gone, they can't come back or whatever. No, don't believe that. And, one of the things I've heard somebody say was that I don't believe in things that, like, basically take power away from me, right? Because there's no point in it. So why would you believe in something or give something energy that takes power away from you? It doesn't make sense, right? So if you apply that philosophy to a lot of things in your experience of life, you'll realize just how far you can truly go as a human being. And with that, I think we're coming to the end of our show here. We're at about 45 minutes. I told you we'll sum up around 40, so I'm going to stay true to my word. This has been Athlete Enlightened right here on Riot Radio. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to the producers, as always, for making this show run. As always, I'll link all of my links to my other work, Sword of Mercury, which is a channel that I do at home, and I elaborate on a whiteboard where I make videos actually in ASMR format. So if you're looking for content to listen to as you drift off to sleep around science or fitness or anything like that, feel free to check that out. Like I said, I will link that in the description below. Check out my previous podcast, Moonstruck, which is a bit more spiritual and scientific if you're into that. I will link my Instagram and TikTok and all of that stuff below as well. I encourage you guys to tune in next week because we do have some interesting projects going on relating to this series that will be transpiring soon. And follow us on DC Media Hub. I think that is it, so I will sum up here. Catch us next time on Athlete Enlightened. I'm Ryan, and I'm out.